Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're here, I'm Benny and I'm passionate about sharing tips and tricks to help you elevate your editing skills. I'm going to reveal one of the most closely guarded secrets on how to set up Photoshop automations and actions to speed up your workflow. I want to be able to touch and share things on here that have actually helped me in my career. Some of these tools and automations I have set up for myself years ago, and I still find them very functional and useful in what I do now. So I'll be pulling back the curtain on one of the industry's best kept secrets. I believe in empowering fellow creatives to work smarter, not harder. By the end of this video, you'll learn how to create custom actions in Photoshop, automating repetitive tasks and saving you a ton of time. You also learn how to reverse engineer actions to commit changes and how to debug actions that break during its application. From intermediate to advanced tips, we will learn how to set up and apply actions when retouching photos by setting up some of the most non-destructive layers during our work. Make sure to stay to the end because we will learn a couple of advanced tips and tricks in setting up our actions using prompts and relative positioning. These are key factors in setting up a very responsive and functional action that can vary between workspaces and also provide an amount of freedom to customize certain tools for different shots. So in this first part of the tutorial, what I want us to do is learn how to identify our action panel and also understand its user interface that it comes with. To look at our action panel, we have to head over to this icon. I have my duct over here. If you cannot find yours, you can go into Windows and then click on Actions. This is going to open up your Actions panel. Now your action panel comes in two main views. This is our list view, and when we click on this icon, we can head over to the button mode or the button view. This is a simplified version of all of the actions that are created, and the thing that we can do here is just click on the actions and they'll run according to how it was created. Let's head over to our list view and let's talk about some of the things that we see in here. So for the purpose of organization, we have what we call action sets, and these are folders in which we can store our actions that we create. So when we tore down any of these folders, you can find the individual actions that have been created. We can click on any of these ones and just run them to execute them. Okay, and then we can also tore down any of these actions. We can see the different commands that were involved in creating this specific action. So when I go in and tore this one down open, also you can see the different commands or actions that we took in creating this specific action. For the purpose of our tutorial, all of the actions that we're going to create will be used in retouching. So we can also organize our work by creating a new folder for all of these retouching tools. Okay, so we can call it retouch. And that is going to create for us a new action set we can store all of our actions in. Now to create a new action is fairly simple. We can click on this icon here and it's going to bring up this new window. It will ask us to give our action a name. So let's just say basic action. And it will ask us to find an existing or a new action set that we've created and store or save our action in. We're going to choose the retouch, but when we click it, we can find other existing action sets to choose from. So we're going to select retouch. Also, it asks for a function key. We can choose, or you can give it any function key that you want. In our case, we're going to skip that and we can give it a color so that when we go into our button mode, it will make identification of this action or any other action of this sort very easy. So we can then hit record and that is going to highlight our record button. So we can stop our recording by hitting this icon. We can also delete whatever action that is being created. Something to bear in mind whenever you're creating any sort of action is that you have to plan out your action or plan out the steps that you're going to take into creating your action so that you don't just record any unnecessary steps. I have already gone through the process of creating the steps involved in whatever action that we are going to create and also the naming conventions that we're also going to use. This will make it easier for our steps to be very intentional and well defined. Okay, so I advise that whenever you're starting any sort of action creation, you have to just plan out the steps so that you don't go about making any sort of like changes that are not necessary. So for this basic action, what I want us to do is be able to create an action whereby when we run it, it will provide us with a curves adjustment layer and also a selective color adjustment layer. Okay, so to do that, we still have our record button on. We can go down to the adjustment layers over here. Okay, head up to layer, new adjustment layers, and then hit curves. This is going to give us this window to label our curves. Let's just say okay. All right, and we can also add selective color adjustment layer to it, and it's also going to register here. Now let me just pause our recording and talk about the commands that we have. So in here, you can see that when we first created our curves adjustment layer, it introduced this make adjustment layer command over here. And when we tore that down, we can be able to identify the type of adjustment layer it created and also the kind, okay? When we tore this one down also, you can see that it gave us or it recorded a selective color adjustment. So that means if we should run this action here, we are going to get the results that we have in here. So let's just test it out. And also that is the thing, it's good to test out actions as you create them. You don't have to wait till the action is completed. You can just, as you're creating them, test it on the way to debug any sort of errors that can come on the way rather than having it all done and then have a lot of steps of command in here that you have to go through. So in our case, we only have 2 commands here to test out. And when I click on this action, I can click on play and that is going to run it. Or we can also go to our button mode And we have the new action that we created with its name and color. So with that, we can also click on it to run it. And it's also going to go through and just execute the commands that we gave, which was the curves adjustment layer and the selected color. Okay. Now let's head back to the list view and let's talk a little bit about some of these things that we have down here. Now, just as you do in your layers panel, we can also click and drag action into the bin icon to delete it. We can also click our action and drag it down into the create new action button, and it will create a copy of that. Okay. So the same steps or the same actions that you take in working in the layers panel can also be done in our list view or action panel. Okay. This is not going to be needed, so we'll delete this one. The next thing I want us to talk about is how we can debug any sort of changes or errors we might have in our action steps or commands. Okay. So we can also move around all of these steps that we've created. So let me just add a few more. Say, I want to select this layer, add some sort of like a vibrance adjustment layer, and also add, let's say, hue and saturation layer. Okay. Let me just stop our action. Let me delete these from here. And let me delete this one. Okay. Great, let's run and test out our action. So in this case, it's going to run all of these commands that we've created. First, the curves layer, selective color, vibrance, and then hue and saturation. How about if I want the hue and saturation be first and then my curves to be second? We can just identify them here below. Okay, we can go through all of the commands and tore them down. I know this is my curves adjustment layer. I want that to run first, and it runs these action in a descending order. So any sort of action that you have closest to the action set, that is what is going to be run first. Okay, then it goes to this one, this one, this one, and then this one. So I think our last command was the hue and saturation layer. Since I want that to be first, I can click and drag it to the top. And this is our curves layer. I can click that and bring it all the way to the bottom. And when I delete all of these guys right here and we test them out, click on the action and then run it, you're going to see that this time around, it started creating the hue and saturation first and then our curves adjustment layer. So this is some of the ways that you can actually understand how to move things around to make sure your action actually works well. Okay. So when done, we can also go back into our button mode and also run it to see if it will produce all of these different layers that we have here. So I'll delete everything and then click on my action again. And that is also going to run all of these actions again. Okay, good. Let's go back to the list view. Good. So when I click on my action and click this button, it can provide me with other menus that I can also play around with. There's a new action and a new action sets. We can duplicate it here. We can delete and then play or execute it. We can also start recording if we are not, and we can also record again, which will start all of the process again. There's the insert menu item, the insert stop, the insert conditional, and these are menus that can help provide us with prompts in creating our actions, which we're going to take a look later. And there's an action option. When we click that, it can break out the action window for us to go over and then redefine some of these things again, should we want them, by providing function keys if we didn't set it first, and also change the colors if we want to change them as well. Okay, we can go further down. Okay, and another thing too I want to touch on is save actions. So you can click on this folder right here, click this, and then you can save your actions and be able to pass it on or share it if necessary. Okay, so I think we'll just stop here with the basic and we just move on to the next part, which is creating a custom dodging and burning action to be used for retouching. In this part, we are going to set up a non-destructive action for a manual dodge and burn workflow. We will also touch on some good practices on how we can customize those actions to the kind of retouching that we do. For us to make sure our action is being saved in the same or correct action set, we can choose a retouch action sets and to have that open, create a new action. Let's call our action dodge and burn. We can save our action in the retouch set. We can also give it a function key if we want, and we can choose a red color for it and then hit record. Okay. In this tutorial, we're going to be using curves to create our dodge and burn layers, but there are also other techniques like using the 50% gray to create both the dodge and the burn layers. But in our case, we'll use the curves. So let's head over to the site and click on curves, or we could go up to layers, new adjustment layers, and curves. There are times that you want to choose your commands from up here, which we're going to look at when we get into relative positioning. But for now, let's just go down here and then choose curves. Now we're going to rename our curves to burn. Now let's call it the burn fixer. Okay. Hit OK. And then we can go up to the curves and change or predefine our curves value to this. This is what I usually like to work with. And then I'm going to go to the mask and I'm going to invert it so that we can paint with white to reveal all of the changes that we did over here. And when that is done, I'll select the layer again and duplicate the layer. I'm going to change or rename it to dodge fixer. Okay, so let's take the copy out. And I also have to set its predefined value. So that is the opposite of what is happening in the burn layer. Okay. Now, what I want us to do is to test out everything. And this is a good habit into making sure you be able to identify problems early in your creation process so that you don't have to wait till you've created so many commands for you to go back and try to sift through everything to find where the problem is. Okay. So let's stop recording our actions or our commands. Let's select our action, delete everything that we have in our layers panel, and run it to see if it works. And voila, it works. One thing you have to bear in mind when you're checking or debugging your layers is to know the hierarchy of everything that you set first. Okay. We set our burn layer before our dodge layer. The naming conventions are also right. Our masks are all inverted, and then we can check the values of the curve that we set. Okay, and everything is working just fine. To continue also, you have to make sure that you're on the same layer that was selected as the last command that you set over here, which was the dodge layer. If you're not quite sure, you can just delete everything and then go back to your action and then run it again to continue. So we are still in here, our dodge layer selected. Right, so whenever we dodge and burn, we are either adding saturation or decreasing saturation by either adding blacks to our hues or adding whites to our hues. By adding blacks to our hues, which is shading, we are actually saturating our image. And by adding white or dodging our image, that means we are tinting or desaturating our hues or our image, okay? So to fix that, we have to provide some corrections for it. So we have to also make sure our recording button is on, but first, let's select our last command and hit record. We are still on the last layer that was selected. So I'm going to go down to my adjustment layers and click on hue and saturation. This is what we're going to use to fix all of the shading and the tinting of the hues of our image whenever we are dodging and burning, okay? Now, the way the hue and saturation layer works is downstream. So everything below is going to be affected by the changes that we make in here. So it is best for us to actually clip our hue and saturation to their respective layers so that whenever we make any sort of changes, those changes are only going to affect the layers that it is working on, okay? So his hue and saturation layer is going to be clipped to our dodge layer. We can do that by holding down Option or Alt to see this icon when we go in between these two layers, or we can hit this icon to just clip the hue and saturation layer to our dodge layer. So now whatever changes that we make to our hue and saturation layer is only going to affect our dodge layer. Now we have to intentionally select our burn layer and go to hue and saturation layer to create its own. And we're also going to clip it to our burn layer, okay? Now the next thing I want to do is to select this layer, select all of these layers again, and then group them with Control G or Command G. Let's rename our layer or the group to Local D and G. Okay, great. Now this is the best time for us to stop our recording to test out everything that we have set over here. To do that, we will delete our layer, go to our action, and then run them using this icon, and boom, it works. Okay, what we can do now is to open it and check one of the most important things, that is the hierarchy that we set for all of these layers from the beginning. We set our burn layer, did set our dodge, and then we came over to our hues, and then this second hue and saturation over here, right? Everything is also clipped just fine. You can also check out the predefined values for each curves, and also the max that we have inverted is also working, okay? So now to make sure that we have the right thing selected, let's just go up ahead and just delete this layer, run the action again so that we can continue. Now I'm going to select the last command that I set and then begin. There's a couple of more groups that we have to set to finish up with our action. And the next one is our global dodge and burn. So let's select our last command, hit the record icon, and then go to curves. All right, I'm going to name this curve as burn contour. Hit OK. I'm going to set my predefined value for the burn layer and then invert my mask. Select my layer, duplicate it, and then rename this layer to dodge contour. Okay, take away copy, hit OK. And then we have to set its predefined value to this one. Okay, select the entire layer and group them. And let's rename our group to global D and G. Good. Now this is the best time for us to also test it out and see if it works, okay? So I'm going to delete everything that we have in our layers, and then I'm going to select my action and I'm going to run it. And then bam, everything works correctly, okay? Again, one thing that you have to check for is the hierarchy of the groups or the layers that you're setting to make sure everything is intact, okay? When we open our global DNG, everything in there is intact, so that is good. So let's set up the next group. Let's go to the last command and hit the record icon, curves, and let's rename our curves to hair hair burn. Okay, let's just call it hair burn. Or let's just say burn hair. Hit OK. Set its predefined value to this. Click on the mask, invert it, click on the layer, duplicate it, and change or rename it to Dodge. Okay. Let's predefine its values as well to this. Now let's select the entire group and then group them. Okay. Give it a name, hair, D, and G, and hit OK. So let's just test out all of these and see if they all work correctly. So I'm going to stop it, go to my action, delete everything I have in my layers panel, and then run my action to see. Boom, and everything works correctly. Okay, the hierarchies are right, and when I open my hair DNG group, the labels and the layers are all set correctly, the values are all correct, the masks are all inverted, and it's the same with our groups below. Okay, great. Next up is our visual aid, and a visual aid is anything that can help us to actually be able to locate and identify problem areas that we have in our group. Okay, others have different techniques that they want to use, but for us, we'll be creating a black and white layer to use as our visual aid. And to do that, we're going to select the last command. Okay, don't forget the last command, hit your record icon, and let's create a new group for that. So we create a new group. Let's rename our group to visual aid, and let's create a new empty layer. And let's head up to edit, fill, and fill that layer with a 50% gray. Okay, now we can use the 50% gray to take out all of the hue that we have in our image by going to the blend modes and move it down to saturation or hues. Let's just choose saturation. So the saturation blend mode can help us to use the 50% gray to take out all of the hues that we have in our image to make it black and white. The next thing is to add an adjustment layer that can help us to control the black and white image. Okay, setting images will need a very contrasty black and white image to be able to identify imperfections in the image so that we can dodge and burn them. Others will not. So in this case, we have to create a curves adjustment layer on top of everything. And with this, we can be able to control how much we want to be able to see in our shadows or how much we want to be able to see in our highlights so that we can be able to identify imperfections in there so that we can be able to dodge and burn them. Okay. So we have our curves recorded right here. I'm not going to make any changes here because all of the images are different. So I don't want to set default values for this curves. It might make it look bad. So I just want to be able to control that manually. I'm able to use this to control how much I want to be able to see. And it's different from image to image. Okay. So we're not going to set any default values for these curves. We can now go ahead and test out everything that we have created now. Okay. So let's stop our recording. Head over to our dodge and burn action. Delete everything that we have on our layers and let's test it out. Boom. Now all of these are working correctly. One thing I also like to do is test it out using our button mode. So let's go over to the button mode. Now you're going to see that we can identify our action with this red color, like what we said earlier. Okay. So I can just click on it to run it and it's going to run the exact same action. Okay. Now, you don't only want to be able to set up all of the actions without including the tools, okay? So since we are dodging and burning, whenever we run this action, we want everything or all the layers to be set for us, as well as our tools. So to set that up, let's go back to our list view, delete everything that we have over here, okay? And then let's go to our let's go to our action and then let's run it. That is going to put us in this step, okay? Let's go to our last command. Hit the record icon. And then what I want to do is just close close out of the group. And then I'm going to select my brush tool. And I'm going to set up my brush tool or the settings for my brush tool here. So for example, let's just say I want an opacity of 50 with my brush. And I want to set my flow to be, say, 33. Okay. And then I want to go and choose the kind of brush I want to work with, from, let's say, hard brush to soft brush. All of these steps are going to be recorded here, so be careful. But we're going to come back here and just take that out in just a sec, okay? So we have our round brush selected. I'm going to click enter, okay? And now I'm just going to stop my recording now. I know that it first selected the hard brush, which I don't want, so I can just click and drag it to the bin icon to delete it. This is what I want now, okay? Now I want to go up ahead and select a different tool to run this action to see if everything works fine. So let's delete everything from our layers. Let's go to our dodge and burn action and let's run it. Everything works fine. Our layer is set up right. And when we move over to our tools, you can see that our brush tool is selected. And you can see that it actually input our values that we actually want right. Okay, so we're ready and set, and we can start dodging and burning. So with that said, I think we can stop here and we can move on to setting up a non-destructive action for our frequency separation.